All right. What is up, everyone? It's your host, SB Philosopher, here back in another episode of the RePHIL Studio. Of course, get your cans as always. We're going to refill to 99 because we are ready to welcome our next set of special guests for this particular set in this episode. So I have the honor and pleasure to welcome Tu and Clam to the RePHIL Studio today. So as a brief introduction to both of them, Tu has a lot of T10 Plus titles, including first place in the Summer Roselia event, as well as T3 in the Karata, aka what is it? Dreams, Poems, 1,000 something. Yeah.
Yep, that's cool.
Yep, and Clam also has a lot of T10 Plus titles, including first place in the Let's Perfect Art Collection, as well as T3 in the, I think it was called the Whom These Chocolates Are For event. So both of you, welcome to the studio. It's a pleasure to have both of you on.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for the invite. I'm excited.
Is there anything else the two of you want to add to the intro that maybe I missed or maybe I botched up?
Well, since we're on the extra topic, Clam actually just completed his recent T10 in Sekai. So me and Clam are like Sekai gaming. We kind of moved from like Bandori to like Sekai, unwillingly, arguably. So now we're mostly tearing in that sphere. And you might see us on the leaderboard.
Okay. All right. Well, it's really cool. We'll definitely talk a little bit about that, your Sekai experience for sure later in this episode. I'm looking forward to hearing a lot from the two of you. So when we get started, we usually talk about how our guests get into Bang Dream, because that's kind of like where it all started. So maybe Clam, maybe we'll start with you. How did you hear about Bang Dream and how did you get into it?
Well, as far as I can remember, when the time, I guess probably a few months after it came out, I saw advertisements for it online, and I was a tremendous, I'm not even a sweaty Sif player, but I just played a lot of Sif, even though I had no idea what I was doing. It was a fun rhythm game to me, but I tried out Bang Dream because it was the same, it was Bushi Road, so I'm all right, maybe I'll try this out. I hated it. I was oh, this isn't Sif, I don't want to play this anymore. But then a few months comes around again, my old IRL friend group starts getting into the game, and they're all really good at it too, so I'm all right, this looks fun, I'll give it a try. And ever since then we casually played together for a few months, and as soon as I found Pubcord, kind of went all downhill from there in terms of the rabbit hole of Bandori. That's how I got my start.
I see. And when you joined PubCore, was it before it was the official server? Or was it after it already became the server?
This was probably around, I want to say a year before it became the official server.
Yeah, that's
because
fair.
This was I think right before BSP2 it was, something like that. Or maybe I played in 1. I don't remember the order of events.
Well, you've played the game for quite some time. That's that's the general gist. Well, that's really cool. You gave it a second chance, and here we are. And Sue, what about you? Similar story, different story? How did you get into Bang Dream?
So I guess you can say that I kind of went down the Love Live pipeline. So I started, Love Live is kind of where I started my rhythm game journey. So I was super into the OG Sif. I was very, very casual, but I really was passionate about the game. And at the time I didn't have the resources to actually go out and cheer crazy. I remember I was a huge Ellie Oshi, and all the big tiers Ardo Nico and Kintoleski. I was oh my gosh, they're crazy, I could never be like them. So after that, I think I actually took a break from rhythm games and I went into Honkai for a couple months. And then from Honkai, I think I saw Bandori. I definitely did not get ads for it, and nobody kind of recommended it to me. I think I kind of just saw it on the App Store because, I played Love Live, so it recommended it to me. That was oh, I think you might like this game. So I downloaded Bang Dream. I actually didn't, my initial impression was I didn't like it, funnily. So like I downloaded it, got to the loading screen, and I heard like the first song that plays. I forgot what it was, but it was that Popipa song, and I was like maybe this is not for me. So I ended up deleting the app, and then I think like 2 weeks later I came back to it, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna try it again. And then from there it was kind of downhill. I got super addicted, and kind of a funny story, but I also hopped into Popcord I think around like October 2018. And I remember that because I think you can actually like go into Pubcord and like search up my name. And like my very first message was like in the introductions. And I was like, hey guys, like I love Afterglow. I'm an Afterglow stan. Like they're my faves, you know? And then I kind of just got into like Roselia. And then from there, Roselia, I got invited to MBN, and that's kind of how I got into like the tiering scene.
Okay. Well, so it's pretty interesting. It definitely seems like the two of you had like, you know, it's different stories, but they all kind of follow a pretty similar kind of pattern. There's like the script is pretty similar where like, you know, you get into the game, you kind of, you know, didn't really have a big first impression, but then you kind of gave it a second chance, and, you know, here we are. And so you already mentioned that it was like Afterglow and Roselia that kind of helped you kind of get into the series. Clam, I forgot to ask you this, but like, was there a particular band or like a character that like made you want to stick around and you know, continue playing the game?
Oh, I was a Roselia fan from day one.
Oh yeah, Roselia fan from day one. That's fair. Yeah.
For me, it was definitely Sayo.
Sayo, yep.
Yes, fellow Sayo stan.
Woo, let's go. Yeah, I always mention this with my fellow Sayo friends, is that like I never really appreciated her at the start because I thought she was just mean. But I realized like after her character development, I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's who she really is. And it's like a big eye opener. So yeah, but
yeah, no, I definitely agree with that, because also my first event that I started really getting into Bandori was actually cooking class. So that was like when they kind of cracked open like that, you know, her whole attitude, and she's like very soft towards Sugu. I was so obsessed with that event. I was really sad because I came in at like the tail end of it, so I didn't get a chance to tier it, and I was very like sad about it, but I was very obsessed with the story.
Okay. Now, too, of course, when you mentioned like how you got into the series, you were already kind of mentioning how, you know, you had a little bit of inspiration, or you saw how other people tiered in other games like in Sif, and then eventually you kind of spiraled down to Pubcord and learning a little bit more about tiering there, and eventually joining MBN. So how was that like that experience, like joining, I guess, you know, the quote unquote tiering community at that time? Like how did you first like get exposed and get into tiering?
Actually, very funny, because you know, Pubcord always jokes like, oh, like why don't you just go for this tier, or like, oh yeah, like just go for T1, like very casually. So to get into MBN, I wasn't aware that, you know, it was Swift at the time. He was the one who started it, and it was kind of, I guess, in the beginning when MBN just started out. I don't know if this is very like boomer, but this happened definitely like 3 years ago or so. But this is when MBN was like just starting out, and he was inviting like more like of the known people in the community. And, you know, like I actually kind of asked him, and, you know, I came into his DMs and I was like, oh, like, can I get, like, I was all really shy. I was like, oh, like, can I get an invite? You know, I only have this T100, my first T100, which was Fair and Fluffy competition. I was like, oh, I only have this title. Like, is it good enough? And he was like, he gave me like this interview, quote unquote, which we kind of laughed at. And like, yeah, he was like, what's your favorite Oshi? Like, oh, like, how did you get into Bandori and everything? Like, our first DMs, it was really funny because I brought this up to him later on. I was like, you know, why did you give me that interview? And he was like, oh, you know, you kind of asked for one. And I didn't know what to say. And I was like, okay. But yeah, once I got into MBN, that's when I met more of the, I guess, like more of the hardcore tiers. MBN, I got to kind of like interact with them and kind of like ask them like, oh, like, how does this happen? Because in my mind, like, someone who sits in a room for like 20 plus hours tapping the screen, like, isn't that like the concept was like outside of my grasp. like I couldn't comprehend it. And I think a lot of like new tiers have that attitude too. But, you know, like talking with people in the tiering scene and just seeing like how they talk about it very casually, it kind of helps you get accustomed to the idea more. And it kind of makes you think like, oh, you know, I know this person, you know, they're not God. Maybe I could like try and do that too. So I started like dipping my toes into more like T1K, you know, like T100, and just like getting to know these people and asking them questions and kind of just poking like, oh, like, you know, like what did you do to prep for this event?
Yeah, well, shout outs to the fact that, you know, you kind of low key joining the community was through almost like a job interview of sorts. It was that is quite something too. So, well, you know, it seems like, of course, the fact that you're here now means you certainly did pass that so-called interview. And then you know, things went quite well and smooth sailing with tiering moving from there. So that is actually quite a pretty funny story. Clam, what about you? We didn't talk about your kind of exposure to tiering yet. You know, you mentioned how you joined PubCourt and such, but for you, how was, you know, what was tiering like, and how did you first get exposed to that?
I don't like really remember too much about like the earliest titles that I have, like at least in my like collection. So like I think my first title was Blazing Bushido, I'm pretty sure it was. But I think I remember the first event like I like saw on my screen was What a Wonderful World. And I wasn't really like, I was kind of clueless about everything at the time, but it wasn't until like when I started talking more in PubCourt, and particularly Largo, that was the event where I started like getting more into the community, because that's where I met like probably one of my closest friends to this day, who is Daz, who's also known as the founder of the Bandori Illuminati, or they call it PTA, which is literally just the Parent Teachers Association and does not mean anything else. But from there, like we tiered Largo together, and just I had no idea what I was doing. I was like doing versus lives without best story, so I was like putting in like 2 stars of the event members, and like this looks good to me, so it's got their event members on it. Spamming like Kiseki in the event song because I thought that was the right thing to do. And that's when I got my first boat. And I don't even know if you'd call it a boat, but it was like 120 or something like that. But that was like my first like introduction to like actually tiering. And like from Daz, I met like a lot of other friends who also were in MDN as well, so that's how I got into there. I don't remember going through the Swift interview thing. I'm pretty sure
yeah, he said it was a me. Okay. He said it was a me thing. I was like, wait a second.
Wow,
special treatment much. Wow.
I had nothing at the time either, though. But yeah, that's how I got my start.
Okay, and you know, like, again, it's kind of it always seems interesting when people first get into tiering, and you know, sometimes they get like that one title, but other times they get the boat, and sometimes the boat is this discouraging thing. But you know, obviously in your case, Clam, it seemed like it was more like oh well, I got boated this time, and you know, things kind of then decided, oh well, I'm gonna definitely get better in tiering, I imagine.
Yeah, definitely. It's like I guess I didn't really think much of it at the time either, because like like just anything above like T100 was kind of like mind blowing with me at the time. Like, damn, these people are like celebrities. They're cracked god gamers, but like, and then here I am, just
you've become one of them.
I have not.
Well, Clam, you did mention earlier, you did mention just now as well, how you eventually like got into MBN as well. So that's how I imagined that maybe the two of you got to know each other. Maybe tell a little bit. I don't know. Either of you could just pitch in, but tell us how you got to know each other, and like how you two became like really good friends in the steering community.
Oh boy, I can actually sprinkle in some more PTA lore. So you mentioned Daz before, or Clam mentioned Daz before, and it's kind of funny because the founding members, quote unquote, of PTA, it was basically I met Daz in MBN, and you know, we kind of hit it off. Daz and I were both Sayo enjoyers. So, you know, like we got along, talked a lot about Sayo, and that's kind of where, you know, like we kind of got close. I don't think I interacted with Clam as much in MBN though. So what ended up happening is I actually didn't meet Clam until after PTA was like formed, or like during SummerSelia, when he joined the SummerSelia server. So PTA was actually founded because me, Daz, and Ku wanted to read Neo Aspect like in voice chat, but just like us. So we were like, okay, we're just gonna make another server, and then we did, and then it kind of just snowballed into like inviting more and more people, and then that's kind of just how PTA was born. I guess it was just born as like a hangout spot that was a little bit separate from MBN, and then eventually I was able to meet Clam and get to know Clam better in PTA. I forgot, my memory is very hazy because this definitely happened a couple years ago. So, you know, me and Clam go back to like, you know, I think like 2019 is when we first met each other. And you know, in PTA, that's when we started getting to know each other and like talking about our lives and stuff. And I actually learned that me and Clam live very close together. We're both in New York. So we were like, oh my gosh, like there was like that point of like, oh, we have something in common. And that's kind of just how that snowballed into like more and more conversation and everything. And, you know, it started out as like, oh, like, you know, I don't really know this person yet, but let's interact because we're in this smaller server together. And then kind of just snowballed from there.
Clam, you want to add to that story? If there's any parts that you recall with your interactions at the start?
I just remember the first time talking to Sue was during SummerSelia itself, and I remember some of the VCs that we ended up having, whether it was Bin drunk reading fanfics, or like Sue downing White Claws towards the end of the event because she was pretty much done with it.
Right before I gotcha too. I needed something because I didn't get Sayo.
Oh no! Yeah. I didn't
get Sayo. I was like, this is gonna be painful. So I was like chugging White Claws and then pulling gotcha at the same time. And I think I got her at like 2 a.m, and I like fell off my chair. And I remember that moment. I was really happy.
Oh, that was the pre-Spark days too. Must be painful.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I was so scared.
Something. Because I remember like going into that event, because that was that leads more into my like tiering start, because that was going to be my first T100, because I really like Roselia, so I'm like, you know, I'm going to do this event. And I had no idea what to expect from like T100 or like gacha in general. So like I just like had hundreds of dollars saved up. I'm like, all right, we're gonna get this gacha, we're gonna get this bread, we're gonna tier our ass off. And it turns out to be like nowhere near like that serious, but like it was definitely like a fun experience to go through, to like actually sit down and play for like hours at a time, and realizing like, I guess it's I don't know what's the word I'm looking for. It's not the easiest thing, but like once you get used to it, it's kind of like second nature.
And doing it with friends too, like when you're in a tiering server and you all have like the same goal, it's very like it makes it much better. Like there's something about doing a T100 like alone versus like doing it with like a bunch of friends that just makes it like it enhances the experience just so much.
Definitely. And it's really cool because, again, just hearing all these, you know, more older sides of the community, like the tiering experience, when a lot of it was based on like smaller like clans, right? We every time we like throw out a bunch of like acronyms, like especially the younger listeners who are maybe newer to the community. It's like, oh, what are all these like random acronyms of tiering clans and such? But it's always really interesting to hear all these like stories that transpired and how people got to really know each other and really get to help each other tiers. So yeah, it was really cool. And also, I guess fun fact now I know is that I guess a lot of big gorillas and whales are in New York. So
yeah, New York gang represent.
East Coast, West Coast.
Oh, whoa! We're not getting to this discussion. That you're hitting a very sensitive topic on my end. But anyway, so going back to SummerSelia too. Was that like the big like first like tiering experience you had? Like I think I don't know if I recall from based on talking with someone like SummerSelia was kind of like was it like one of your first, if not like your very first like big tiering experience?
Yes, it was.
Wow.
So remember how I mentioned I got that T100 Fair and Fluffy?
Yeah,
that was the title that I got right before SummerSelia.
Oh.
And yeah, so I didn't even get a chance to dip my toes into tiering. I was kind of just thrown into the boiling water and expected to float. But I was so terrified for that event. So I guess to explain some context behind SummerSelia, essentially, I think the people who were supposed to do it dropped as the event was getting closer. So one of my close friends at the time, someone who's also been on the podcast before, was Loon. I definitely consider Loon to be one of the biggest factors in like me tiering in general. So he was kind of like noticing that no one was going for it, and me and him were talking at the time, and he said, "Hey, like it's empty. You should go for it. You should make the server or like inherit the own server or inherit the server from like somebody." I think we ended up making a new server, and he kind of like set it up for me, and then it was up to me to kind of just reach out to people. And I literally told him, I was like, I only want T2. Like, I don't know, like, I'm not ready for a T1, you know, like I wasn't ready for podium at all. I wasn't expecting that at all. But he was like, no, like you have to do this. Like, well, he wasn't forcing me, but he was like, you know, like not opportunities like this don't come a lot, you know, with especially nowadays where the tiering scene is much more crowded. So he was being very encouraging, helpful, giving me like tips on like, you know, like here's how you're gonna do this. And then I actually whale fluence, we call that like influencing whale people to whale. I actually slid into Pastry's DMs, and I was like, "Hey, wanna be podium with me?" And I was like, very like I think one of the very first DMs that me and Pastry was like me trying to convince him to do SummerSelia T3 with me specifically. So it was just me like poking him, being like, "Hey, it's still free. It's a free title." And I think he eventually gave in, which is very funny. But yeah, I was very, very thrust into that situation, and you know, it was kind of a blessing because that was the first time I ever cheered so high, and it was nerve-wracking, and it was amazing, and it was like it was a lot. It was a lot of emotions I experienced during SummerSelia, but I'm very happy that I did it.
A lot of emotions indeed, Clam. You already mentioned a lot of the interesting stories that happened during that time. But yeah, that's a really amazing achievement to like suddenly go from like, oh well, I'm just kind of getting my toes wet with like tiering to be like, oh well, I guess I'm just gonna get first place in this title in this event, really, you know, just casually. So big jump, big shout outs to that. That's like you know, not an easy feat for sure, but yeah, shout outs to the whale fluencers for sure. They definitely gave a lot of support there. Yeah. Clam, I don't know if you want to add anything else about your SummerSelia experience, because I imagine that sort of I imagine after getting that T100 and seeing people like Tsu be able to get like a T1 like that, you might have also maybe slightly got whale fluenced as well, I imagine.
Oh, from there, no, I was even more terrified of tiering. But I was like, all right, T100s are easy. So like, you know, those are like something I kind of wanted to do more. So
sure.
I guess after that leads into my next T100, which is also Sue's next T10, which was Roselia versus Afterglow. And there was definitely some good stories from that one too. Sue, do you have anyone you want to share right now, or?
Oh boy, I did Roselia versus Afterglow during either finals or midterms of my master's program, and it was something. I was it was a very stressful time. Not the best judgment here on my end, because, you know, studying for exams and everything. And then I also went to, it wasn't that bad. My team wasn't great. That was a big problem. But, you know, it was a lot of like time management. And then I ended up going to Anime NYC with Pastry that year. So we met up, and while we were waiting on the line, I remember I was like, do you want to tier with me? So we were waiting on a line for a Bandori event. We were pubbing, just me and Pastry were pubbing on this line. I think it was the year that Kokoro's Seiyu came to like Anime NYC and she performed. And we were waiting on the line for this event, and we were just pubbing. And I was like, oop, I'm in 10th place. I should play. But yeah, that was an interesting time. That was my first official T10.
You skipped a few steps getting to T1 first and then getting to T10, but yeah, I think I remember Pastry mentioning about that experience, because again, just like you, he was also at Anime NYC, and it's just like, well, should I enjoy my time being a weeb, or, you know, maybe try and like maybe squeeze in, get the T10, and decided to take the boat. So yeah, but it's pretty interesting to hear from a different perspective as well. So yeah, it's quite neat there. Yeah, so it's really cool that you know, you have to learn a little bit so much about all the tiering experiences you have, and it's like both of you have. It's very unique and always have some pretty like fun, interesting parts to it. So I guess because we've already talked about like Tsu's like first T10, and we even got already to her T1, but Clam, when did that really like happen? When did like your you know, your inner like wanting to get like a T10 or even higher, like I don't know which one came first for you, but when did that really start, and when did that really like ended up you know, materializing?
I very clearly remember this one. So this comes from mostly from Cara Expo, because it was that year 2019 or 2020? I forget which one, but it was the one that I went to get together with Sue as well. We had a lot of fun there, aside from, you know, sitting in lines and getting less than 5 hours of sleep the entire weekend. But I just like strongly remember like everyone there who played like Bandori like put out their device with like their titles on it. So like you had like the 1s, the 2s, the 3s, the 10s, and then there was just me
on the table
with and like Lucia was just looking at us, and like Lucia was like looking at us like, what is wrong with these people? But like, I know we're giving him money, so it's okay. I just remember like just being at the end with my hunch, and I'm like, man, I want higher than 100 now. So that's when I started to plan out my first T10, which was originally going to be Prelude, but you know, my schedule didn't really work with that at the time, and I'm kind of glad it did, because that event was a bloodbath. But that's something else. So instead, I did Valentine's Day Himari, because I met Kimane there at Cara Expo, and he was really cool. He was telling me about the event and how he was going for it. He also told me that his roster was 1 out of 10, and the event was coming up in like a month.
Oh no!
Literally, just no one wanted to tier it for some reason. But he was like, yeah, so he's talking about it more, and like we talked more and more on Discord after that. I'm like, you know what? All right, I'll tier with you. So I started off as 10, and the event got closer, and still no one was on the roster, and it was like a week before. So then I'm like, all right, you know what? We're gonna do podium, because I mean it's open, no one wants it. Like, what's the worst that could happen? And then from there, we also grabbed Kevs, who was tiering with us, and also Ardo, you know, the number 1 Roselia stan.
Yeah.
Totally not a Canon stan whatsoever. Yeah, that was my first experience tiering with that. It wasn't like anything special, I guess per se, but like it was the time I got to like really experience going like 20 hours in tiering and seeing like it does take a toll. It did take a toll on me quite a bit, but like it was overall a very chill event though, so I was able to just take it easy for the rest of the event. We started grabbing more and more people along the way. We grabbed Pandar, we grabbed Flant, we grabbed pretty much just like we grabbed like a whole full roster of 10, and then it came down to like the wire of a few hours for like fighting for T10 versus T11, and I just remember like seeing Zenpai like tearing on a plane to try and like keep up with D10. I'm like, that is dedication right there. That is insane.
Man, that is quite something. But you know, it's always fun to like, you know, when you mention all these names, you hear like very familiar faces and names, and that's like how like, you know, it's really interesting because it's a pretty big community, but we all, at the end of the day, we all kind of know each other, and we have like a bunch of, you know, people that we all know and get to know each other. So I think what's really funny, especially about your story, Clam, was that Cara Expo, that was in 2019 because that was the last time it happened. I was also there as well, but I wasn't really like deeply entrenched in the community, so I didn't really know anyone. I did recall seeing like that picture of like all the people trying to put like the phones and like with their titles and such. I'm like, wow, look at all these like, you know, crazy people all gathered together all at once. Like, come on, what is going on?
Yeah, shout out to that one guy who actually, I think they were watching us organize it, and he was like, hey, can I get in here? And he like had like a T10K or something. He made it into the picture though, so shout out to that guy.
Yeah,
he slipped his like device in there, like
you know, just, you know, get rid of, if you ignore the bunch of zeros in the end, like, yeah, it's a T1, right? Yeah. I finally remember that event as well, because like, you know, I also remember the lines that were ridiculous and not too fun. I was like up at like 4 a.m. or even earlier than that to try and like, because I was also like trying to like, I was in the middle of like doing a cosplay as well, and then like I was lining up, and it was just a nightmare just to try and get autographs, and people got hurt. It was kind of brutal. That event was pretty brutal.
I think we were there when people were getting trampled.
Yeah.
I was like, it was like, I forgot what time it was, like 5 a.m, and you have like this crowd of weebs just and like a crowd of like weebs, 2 security guards, and then like the 2 security guards were just standing there like, oh my god, like what do we do? Like they're not gonna stop these weebs from like rushing them, and like it was crazy. We actually, so funny story about Cara Expo. I think Clam might have been there too, but while we were in MBN, we found out that there was like a whole lot of people from MBN going to Cara Expo, and some of us were also flying in. So like for me, I flew from New York to Cali. Clam and Ku were also flying in. So there was like, I want to say like 12 of us. We all rented an Airbnb, and we called it like the Whale House, because like a lot of us had like insane like podium titles and everything. Mm-hmm. And I remember it was very fun. It was just, you just crammed a bunch of tears in like a house. And no, we did not cheer in that house. We just enjoyed each other's company. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it was a crazy, crazy experience. It was unforgettable.
Yeah, for sure. I wish like I knew like some of you, like the community a little bit more. I joined the community much later after I went to Cara Expo, but you know, it just definitely seems like a really fun time to hang out with people that like you call really good friends that you build throughout the journey there. And I think what I personally like about Cara Expo the most was that maybe it's a blessing in disguise. Well, Discord was down during that weekend, so everyone had to interact in person, not like on Discord. You not have people like weebs on their phones, even though they're like literally right beside each other, just on their phones on Discord. Instead, it's like, you know, you actually have to like talk with people. So I thought that was pretty like, you know, a bit of a blessing of disguise. But yeah,
it was. Yeah. It was very surreal, kind of matching the face to like a Discord profile, because I think there's like this disconnect between like your Discord profile is like this cute anime girl icon, and then you see them in real life and they're not the cute anime girl icon. Like, whoa, your brain goes, oh my gosh, whoa, that's a person.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with that. So, you know, hopefully Cara Expo actually happens, you know, maybe this year, maybe ends up being next year. But, you know, whenever the next Cara Expo is, I hope I'll be able to go and also know a lot more people who are going. So it's there. Yeah,
100%.
I'm down. Yeah, I'm there.
Super duper down. Like, because my only, like, I want to like kind of remember like meeting with tears out there, and not like, you know, the horrible scene of the guy right in front of me getting trampled while standing in line, because that actually happened. So I saw a guy actually get trampled. It was just it was
Oh my gosh.
yeah, it was a guy I knew too, so it was
that.
like
I remember that. We were running, so we all started running. So I did not start sprinting that moment. I know I keep going back to that moment, but it's very vivid. I swear, I thought my life was like flashing before my eyes.
Me too.
No, but I saw Clam and Sky in the crowd, and I grabbed them by their arms. I was like, guys, we gotta get out of here. We're gonna die. So I was like running and like dragging Clam and Sky like right behind me.
Yeah, that was like probably the closest I've ever had to near-death experience.
Yeah, agreed.
Death by weebs.
Oh man. All right, let's move away from this topic. Let's talk a little bit more about what ended up happening afterwards, right? Because like there was instances like you ended up getting third place in Karata. Any notable stories from there? Like, I know again it was you tearing once again with everyone's favorite whale pastry, but any specific stories you remember about that?
So actually Karata was, so what happened was I forgot which titles I did, but I actually think I took a hiatus after my T10 Roselia versus Afterglow. I experienced a lot of burnout because I did 2 tiers so close together.
Yeah.
And at that time, Fire Emblem 3 Houses like came out, so I went through this whole like Fire Emblem 3 Houses phase. Like, if you guys saw my Twitter, I was like a different person. I apologize for that. But after that, the funny thing is, I told Pastry over dinner. So it was me, Pastry, Bin, and Michaela, and we went out for sushi because we all lived in like the area. I think Bin was visiting. He flew in from, he's a West Coaster as well. So he flew in, and we all met up for, I think, Anime NYC the following year. And we all went out for sushi. And of course, because we're tiers, we came up on the topic of like tiering. And Pastry did say that he was interested in tiering Karata. And, he asked me, he was like, would you like a spot for Karata? And at the time, Karata was, it was months down. I think it was a year away. So at the time, I don't really plan tiers like that in advance. You'll never really see me make a survey where I'm like, oh, like I'm going to tier this event a year from now, because I really don't know what I'm going to be doing in a year. So, I kind of just told him, I was like, oh, like I'm not sure what I'll be doing in a year, but if I'm still tiering, I'll do it with you. So I ended up coming back around Karata, and Pastry hit me up because he was like, hey, do you still want to tier Karata? And I was like, you know what? I'm down. I still have the team. I had the team. I think I had like very, very, very close to pre-optimal. It was like all 4s because I got very lucky in gacha. And he was like, well, do you want a T10 or do you want a podium spot? Because I believe one of the podium spots was open because it was him for T1 and then me and Hinaya. And, he was like, oh, okay, like you two can decide amongst yourself which spot do you want. And, I think Hinaya wanted T2. And I was like, I do not care. I wasn't gunning for any particular spot. And, I just want to have a good time. So I was like, okay, I'll just take T3. So, that's kind of just what happened. Once again, like after a hiatus of like Bandori, I was kind of just plunged back into the tiering scene, and I came back with that T3. And I remember being very, very determined to retire at that point. Like in my thank you and everything, I was like, thanks guys, this is my last tier. You'll never see me again. It was nice knowing you. I was like, yeah, I'm done tiering after this. And then I think after this title, I did like 3 more T10s. You're never really free.
Yeah, you never really fully retire, eh?
Nope.
Yeah. So, retirement is a lie, I suppose.
It's not real. Nope, It's not real.
Clam, you also tiered that event, eh?
Yes, I did.
And how was that overall?
Overall, it was really dead. The thing is,
we were mentioning
all of like the T10s were parked by day 2, and it was a 9-day event.
Oh,
So we all just
Jesus.
kind of like sat around, just like talking in BC or something, while like pastry just like slapped away. Because we were all still there for pastry in the end, but like in terms of playing, we were all like pretty much just done. The only thing I just vaguely remember from that is how we changed all our names to Chihayafuru. I remember it was Sal's thank you letter, who also T10'd. She didn't know Ku's name, so she just called him Wakamiya Shinobu. It was so funny, and that just became a running gag, just to always call Ku Wakamiya.
Oh boy!
I think Ku, the funnier part, Ku like died after that event. He just stopped playing, so I think his name just stayed Wakamiya Shinobu for like the longest time. He just never changed
That's crazy. That's crazy. And funny enough, yeah, I know for sure. Like that was Sal's first like big tiering event. That was also like my first like tiering experience too. So, it's pretty cool to see like people end up getting like the T10. I was like, whoa, like these people are really cool. So, and obviously that's how I spiraled into tiering as well. But yeah, it's like I think one key takeaway out of this discussion is that no lunch dates or dinner dates with New York Bank Dreamers. You're gonna get whale fluence. So I will take notes and make sure I don't follow that. Clam, you then afterwards, right? Because this is when it was closer to your T1, because eventually this random Nanami event, Let's Perfect Our Collection, was coming up. But what kind of decided, or what helped you decide that was going to be an event that you wanted to tier and actually gun for T1?
There's a really funny picture that I have to find of like this was when like Morphonica like was in like the data mines, like before we even got announced. Like we saw their names, we saw their we heard their voices, we saw like their characters. I'm like, you know what? I want to tier for Nanami. I'm already like interested in doing this, and then like I'm literally like, if Nanami gets a mixed verse like 2 months before it gets announced, I'm like, if Nanami gets in mixed verses, I will T1. And sure enough, that's the first event she gets. I'm like, all right, let's go.
Let's get it, eh?
And that was the first time I kind of just experienced like planning. I know Sue was talking about how like planning out like an event like so very long in advance is like kind of just like not her thing. And I also come to learn it's not really my thing either, because like I found it like very just like it makes it like just stressful or like anxious waiting for it to like happen. But eventually the event came around. I think it was like I felt more than ready for it. I did like just below 24 hours, and then I got sent to the hospital.
Oh,
because I kind of forgot to eat or drink the entire time. But eventually, though, I was able to recover from it and get well on pace. And thanks to everyone's support, I was able to get the T1.
Man, that's again, that's also like the scary thing about tiering, right? Like you really have to you're pushing yourself a lot to play so many hours, and then sometimes you have to remind yourself that health is the first most important thing. You're definitely not the first person on this podcast who mentioned halfway through tiering where health concerns happen, but glad you were okay. You were able to.
Yeah, it wasn't like a serious shock or anything like that. Yeah, but it was just like it was something that just had to be taken care of. And then recovering from that, and honestly, I was kind of really happy with how I finished out the event. So I was like glad it happened.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear, Clam. When you mentioned wanting to tier for Nanami, because that was like when the data mines were just out, you weren't even like officially released. Like, did you immediately when you saw Nanami, maybe even not knowing her personality, you're like, okay, yep, that's it, I'm tiering for her? Like, is that like how it went, or?
Yeah, just off of design, that was like definitely like the big part of it. But then like we started learning more about them, and like I started reading like Morphonica story translations, and she was definitely the one I like gravitated towards the most. And like Morphonica in general, I came to like really appreciate a lot as my second favorite band.
Yeah, Morphonica definitely, for sure. They're very very well designed band as well. So Yeah, well, that's really good to hear, Clam. And I guess, for our listeners out there, right, lesson learned, right? Make sure tiering is good, but make sure you take care of yourself and, make sure health is a priority as well. And as we mentioned in previous tiering experiences as well, right? Managing your time, also something to keep in mind, right? It's not easy to balance, let's say, work or a master's program, for instance. That's not easy. I'm actually kind of glad, now talking about this, I'm kind of glad that I kind of started tiering when I was now a productive member of society, not necessarily at school. I feel like if you're tiering during school, that's just, wow, that's crazy. You have to study for exams and homework, all the stress of exams and stuff. I don't know if I would personally be able to do that. It's quite
unlike
challenging.
Work, you can't call out of exams. You can't call out of a midterm.
Yeah, you can't email your prof, be like, can I postpone my exam? I'm playing this game called Bang Dream Girls Fan Party.
I think it's kind of the opposite for me though.
Okay.
I think with work, it's I just there's just giant chunks of the day that I can't really play the game. Mm-hmm. And then when I get home, I'm just oh, I have to play the game, but I'm tired. Mm-hmm. I have tiered it before a few times with the work, and I mean it's fine if it's just if it's a chill event or if it's just a T10. But
mm-hmm.
I can't really imagine doing a podium unless I take off work, which is also kind of limited as well. I think school you have a little bit more flexibility to play, but if it lines up during exams, then it's just unlucky.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, again, it's all a matter of trying to balance your schedule well, and you don't want to sacrifice your work or your studies too hard in order to get your titles. So I think a lot of people, it's just a matter of trying to find that time management skill, and for the two of you being pretty seasoned tiers, it just became a thing, right? A natural thing where you kind of eventually learn about yourself a bit more and figure out what your limits are and how you're able to best manage your time.
Yeah, I think that every tiering thing, I think if you want to get into the world of tiering, I think the smartest thing to do would definitely be to treat each tiering experience, no matter how many times you do it, as a learning experience. So every single time I tiered, I was making mental notes of what worked and what didn't work. Where for example, VC kept me up, I'm going to do this, or listening to music kept me up, so I'm just going to do this. And then kind of tweaking your behavior depending on how you're feeling and kind of testing your limits, and also paying attention to what other people do as well. So that's kind of just how, despite having all these tiers, it's it's still a learning experience. I still learn so much about what I can do and what works for me. And even when it's getting down to nitty gritty things I think that 3 hours of sleep is optimal for my body specifically. Or when I meal prep too, I remember for Brighter, I meal prep pasta. So I tried eating pasta at 6 a.m. and it was a terrible idea for me personally, because my body just I food comaed right afterwards. So I was okay, next year we're not doing pasta. So kind of just making adjustments, and every tiering you use as a learning experience, and that's kind of just how you get better at it. Yeah,
for sure. No pasta and pasta palettes events. Noted. Well, honestly, again, that was, again, for both of you, thank you so much to the two of you for sharing a lot of terms of your Bang Dream tiering experiences. It's great to hear that, all the amazing achievements you've obtained. And some of them have been many years ago, others a little bit more recent. But regardless, just going to give my congratulations to both of you once more in terms of your tiering achievements.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, everyone. It's Phil here. Hope you're enjoying the episode so far. As a reminder, the RePHIL Studio is available on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. And feel free to subscribe to your favorite platform so that you're up to date with all of the weekly episodes. And if you really enjoy it, feel free to leave a comment and give a high rating on any of the platforms you use. All that support is greatly appreciated. If you really want to support my content and the RePHIL Studio, consider joining the Filler Nation by either subscribing to my Twitch channel or by joining the Patreon. Links in the description below. Any support is greatly appreciated. And again, I want to give a big shout out and thank you to all the Filler Nation members who've been constantly supporting me, and you'll be featured in this video every time. So definitely check it out if you are interested. And for our Filler Nation members, again, I greatly appreciate your support. We have a channel, the RePHIL Academy VODs channel, where there'll be VODs of my streams as well as possible other side projects on the side. So check out the card above if you'd like to subscribe and check out other content that I may be doing in the future. And of course, feel free to join the Unga Academy Discord server, links in the description below, so that you could be up to date with the live recordings of the RePHIL Studio podcast, as well as contribute to the studio question that happens in every episode. So check it out, and thank you all so much for the support. The RePHIL Studio episode will resume shortly. Now, of course, eventually, Sega decided, hey, why don't we make this other series called Project Sekai?
What's the name? I never recall.
Hatsune Miku Colorful Stage Project Sekai. So something like that. So that, a game like along the lines of that. So for the two of you, I either of you could answer this, but for the two of you, what I guess, as a curiosity, what kind of made you so interested into the series in Project Sekai to the point where you decided to both of you decided it's about time to migrate. So I guess the short version of my question is, what does Project Sekai have that made you feel that does something better than Bang Dream that convinced you to move to that game?
Project Sekai has Mizuki Akiyama and Bang Dream does not.
Valid answer.
I actually just noticed me and Clam actually have matching Mizuena.
Yeah.
We did not plan this before.
Yeah.
I think for me though, it wasn't even like the gameplay part that really drew me in, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But it was mostly just the fact that it's all these old Vocaloid songs that I loved when I was way younger, and I had that little Vocaloid phase too. And it's all the songs that I remember from my childhood, and I'm oh, these were so good. And
mm-hmm.
hearing them covered by real singers now too, while also hearing the originals, was just oh my god, this is insane.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's how I really started getting interested in it.
Yeah, I remember Clam was actually the one, they got into it before me, and I was not interested in Project Sekai at all. I actually muted the chat. I was oh, this is a rhythm game. I'm not going to get into a rhythm game. Yeah. And then I think in another chat, they were talking about this pink-haired character named Mizuki. And it started, the small domino was me asking, oh, who is that? And Clam was explaining to me who Mizuki was. And it piqued my interest. It was actually during Mizuki's first focus event during the Kamiyama High Festival on the JP server. So that night that I asked who Mizuki was, I spent 5 hours re-rolling for a Mizuki account, rolling for that specific 4-star card, because it was kind of just love at first sight. I just thought Mizuki was so stunning. And it was, after that, I just started playing on the JP server. I actually had never played on the JP server as a main account, at least. I did download JP Bandori, I think for Noble Rose, because I thought that was a really neat set. I kind of just did the gacha and that was it. But for this one, I actually kept my account and I tiered on this JP account too. So that was kind of the small domino for me, at least. So Clam, I attribute that to Clam telling me who Mizuki Akiyama is, and now I'm here.
No problem.
and for you, Clam, in your case, what made Enna so special to you?
To be honest, I can't even remember. I think most of it just came from voice and design. So
for sure,
I picked out a bunch of faves from each group. I'm all right, so I'm just gonna go look into these ones, and then I started reading more into there's like the band stories, and then I went into more the character stories, and eventually settled on the Shinonome siblings as my favorites, and ever since then I just like been obsessed with them.
Yeah, for sure. I think I was like pretty similar, because like when I first got into Project Sekai, I'm not like of course I'm like not nearly as big into it as you two are. But when I first got into the series, I definitely like looked over the characters and be like, oh, who do I like design wise and such, and it ended up like, I don't know what happened to me, but like, or like it just kind of like a couple of choices here and there. I also knew that like Nigo was probably going to be like my favorite unit, like just looking at like how they like their songs and their characters, I really liked them. And I definitely drew to Enna quite a bit as well when after learning a bit more, and then I realized, wait a second, this is another older sister character with inferiority complex who hates carrots. I might have a little trend here of like who I like.
I think it's the carrots. They have to hate carrots. Yeah,
they have to hate carrots, and and such. So it was quite a coincidence, but either way, because again, getting into a new game entirely, that's obviously like a big like jump, like a big jump that you have to do, right? You both mentioned how you initially were kind of into Sif, and then initially jumping into Bandori was kind of hard. But then, things started spiraling down. And now it's the same for Project Sekai, and you two now playing that. Now, when it comes to your experiences in tiering, maybe just first enlighten us for maybe some of our Bandori listeners who may not be as familiar with how other games work, but maybe in your opinions, what makes Project Sekai tiering different, maybe similar, maybe better, maybe worse? Any insight about any of the tiering? Could it be for JP? It could be for Ian. I know, you have experience tiering JP, and probably the JP is difficult. That's hardest thing ever. But maybe share some of your thoughts about tiering in Sekai versus Bandori.
I already know what Clam is going to say. I think we already have the same thing on mind. We complain about it all the time. It is way more expensive.
Yeah. And
that's why when you said you weren't into it, I was like, okay, good. You should not. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. Sekai tiering.
The worst enemies.
Yep.
Yeah. And the main reason, and again, just correct me if I'm wrong, but and for those who may not be familiar, the main reason why it's a bit more expensive is, there's a few reasons. One, a lot of the times you might even have to like 10 flame, even though it's like may not be the most like ideal, but 10 flaming is a real thing, and cans burn down very quickly. And also, getting dupes is a good thing, unlike in Bandori. Where dupes can help you with improving your score quite significantly too. So that makes things very expensive.
To the point, it got to the point where we started stockpiling dupe cards. I remember someone was like doing the math for specifically like high tiering, and of course I'm talking about like high tiering on the JP server as well. So tiering on a JP server where the player base is just like insanely high comparatively to the EN server, of course, where it is much less competitive. There's just less people willing to go that high. So I'm actually not sure if you're aware, but I did get a JP T10 for a Nigo event.
Ooh.
And that was kind of... It was definitely a different experience than any EN tiering, whereas I would say EN tiering, both in Bandori and also now on EN Sekai as well, you're kind of in the smaller bubble because, like I said, there's not a lot of people who are willing to spend, a lot of money into a game. Most of the people on EN, they're more casual, more like fish, like dolphin level spending. But, on the JP server, there's like tons of people where they're willing to pour in this amount of money. They are very like dedicated, and it's like a very serious thing. So having to switch between that, where you're in the small community and you're kind of working towards this goal, versus like on the JP side, you mostly tier in like Twitter rooms. So if you post a Twitter room with a code and You can also like tweak requirements. You get a room like very instantly, and it's very sustainable. I'm not gonna lie, it's very easy to get in a room, and it's also very sustainable. So you can kind of like keep the momentum going. So they're just two very different experiences between high tiering on the JP tier, you know, obviously besides like price, and EN tiering, which is like a completely different thing where you kind of have to play into like the servers, play into, I guess, more like server politics, whereas like on the JP server, you can just post your tweet and then you're off running and you can play for however long you can play for.
Yeah. Wow. That's it's quite different. You answered a bit of both what I wanted to talk about, both in terms of like the in-game experience, but also like the community experience. It actually seems quite different to JP compared to like pretty much any other game that many of us are familiar with. So yeah.
You mentioned how like there's there could be like a good thing about it and like a bad thing about it. But I think the one really good incentive for like tiering in that game is what, like, and I think this like genius, it's character ranks, which is like you level up like your bond with a character, or like you level up their bond between characters, and like they do there's a lot of ways of increasing it too. You don't have to just tier. You can just like play solo live all day long. You can make costumes, you can buy stamps, you can do all that stuff. And I think that like really incentivizes like playing more and more, like not even just for like tiering, but just like casually. Yeah, that's I find like the most like fun aspect about it.
I definitely agree.
Nothing
with
that I've seen from any I have not seen that from any rhythm game, whereas like, you know, in the beginning, when you play Bandori, you are incentivized to play more because you have the stories to unlock, you know, you have the bands that you want to see more of. And that's where kind of the playing ends. You know, once you reach that level cap, you've unlocked all the stories. And then the only thing after that would be the events. Whereas in Sekai, you have, if you do, I think the max number you can play for character, like leader lives, if you have like Enna as your leader and you do like 10,000 games with her, you can slowly work your gauge up to like get more prizes. You get like the coveted stickers. I don't know if you've heard about the sticker that you can only unlock by like doing X amount of things for this character, and they give you multiple avenues, and it's like great because you can set long-term goals, but it's also bad because if you're used to throwing your wallet at your things, it entices you more to spend money on the game because you want that title. So, you know, it's a blessing and it's a curse at the same time. I
think the people at Sega have done very good jobs of figuring out like the behavior of players and like how to maintain player attention and get them to spend more. I think they've done a scarily good job with this game. And it's funny because like when I think about Sekai, like I haven't like really like put too much focus on Sekai personally. I've done like a little bit of like, I tried to like casually tier, and I think I've never really gotten boated in Iandori like at all. But like for some reason in Sekai, maybe it's because like, you know, it's maybe the aforementioned things like, oh, I'm not in like really in like a tiering server. I'm not like really like tiering with friends, so it makes the experience a lot like a lot not as enjoyable. Like I've been like boated to like twice already in Sekai. It's just like, oh well, and it's all like, you know, it's just like, I don't know, it's just. It's very different. It is quite different, but I still really quite enjoy the series. It's a really fun series, and I could definitely see why a lot of people do enjoy it, and for good ways, and also the whale ways. So yeah, it's pretty quite neat there. I guess one more thing, like maybe we could talk a little bit more about your individual experiences in tiering in Sekai. You've already you already mentioned a bit about your T10 and such, and you know, I applaud to you for that because you're definitely one of the few people in the Iandori community that have a JP-T10, and that's just JP-T10 in Sekai. That's crazy. That's honestly like what a feat. That's no words to describe how crazy that is. But in terms of like maybe like the two of you in your recent Iandori kind of or not Iandori, Ian Sekai. I believe both of you have Ian Sekai titles as well. Like how did that experience go? And I think too, we could start with you with your I believe it's first place in the Kamiko event, was it?
Yes, that event, like I previously mentioned, was my first event on JP Sekai as well. It was kind of the event that kicked off my love for Mizuki. So this event was extremely important to me on the EN Sekai server. I think, like going into EN Sekai, we didn't even know it was going to exist. But in the back of my mind, I was like, if EN Sekai ever becomes a thing, I need to get that title. That is like the event for me. Like I was so determined to do it. And I actually had competition for the very first time in any tiering adventure that I've had. There was another person in the Insekai community who was also going to go for it as well. And it was my first time having competition. So, it was extremely terrifying. I had never fought anyone for a podium before. This person had, been building up like a repertoire because they were tiering previously as well. So, how in Sekai, you have this smaller kind of like bubble of tiering, and like I said, you have to play like the server politics where preferably you are more well known, and you have like a lot of people willing to support you. And I definitely was at a disadvantage because I had a lot of people who were close to me, but my server was like comparably smaller than the competing server. So it was like it was their server, which was like 200 something people versus like my server, which only had like 50 something people in it. And then even within that 50 people, not all of them played Sekai too. So, they were kind of just there for moral support. So it was very, very scary. And that event, I kind of pushed that was like my true limits. I had never previously in any event tested out like my limits, like how long I can stay up for, et cetera, et cetera. So I actually broke a lot of records during that tier specifically. So I was able to stay awake for like 62 hours. I was awake for 62 hours because the event, the day of the event, I did not take off for work. So I was awake that morning. But I did get a good night's sleep. And I played for about 51-ish like hours. Wow. And I got to the point where Clam was like one of the people. I had a VC support set up, and Clam was yelling at me. He was like, "Sue, you can do it. You can stay awake. You got it." Because I was like hallucinating. I was like very delirious at that point. But yeah, that was a very scary event for me on multiple fronts. I'm very surprised that I was able to get the T1. It was very humbling. My opponent and I, we fought very hard. But I was, I was the one who was able to pull through, I think, because the event was like very like important to me. For sure. So I'm very happy that I was able to secure that title.
I imagine that it was probably quite difficult because I know probably a lot of your friends, all of you play JP Sekai, and that, a lot of for them, they probably consider JP Sekai to be like the main game for them, not necessarily EN Sekai. So I'm not sure if like some of your friends ended up like, downloading EN Sekai just for the sake of helping you fill. I don't know if that was a thing.
So it kind of was. I know a couple people came to me and were like, "Hey, like if you have an alt account for, if you had like a reroll account, a spare reroll, I'll help you." Phil, unfortunately, did not have any spare rerolls, but surprisingly, the people that pulled through, actually one of them is listening right now. It was, I'm not going to say any names, but one of them, someone who's listening right now, was very like helpful during that event, pulled very long hours for me. And surprisingly, what we weren't expecting as well, was a lot of boomer Bandori cheerers came out of the woodwork, and we saw them downloading Sekai all of a sudden. And we were like, "Hey, we know that person, like I know you, I remember you asleep," and like, R2 and like a lot of like, older Bandori cheerers, who I haven't seen in quite a while, kind of reintroduced me to them via Sekai, and I got to see their faces again, and also Bin as well. Yeah, it did kind of feel like an Avengers Assemble kind of moment where I was like, wow, like all these people who I cheered with a couple years ago. I remember the last time I tiered with Hiri. It was her first T10. SummerSelia was her first T10 in Bandori, and all of a sudden I'm seeing her and I'm playing Ian Sekai with her, and it was kind of like crazy, seeing all these like old boomers coming out of the woodwork, and I kind of just pulled them in because we knew, and they were extremely helpful. I owe it all to the people in my server for that event, because we were able to with like room upkeep, because unlike Bandori, room composition, like the people in your room actually matter, which is a really dumb rule in Sekai, which is why you should never tier Sekai. That's a whole other can of worms. But yeah, the room composition actually matters. So it was very surprising to see all that support, and I was very happy. It was like I have no way to express like how happy that made me to see like all these old friends like coming back and kind of like supporting me. I was very humbled by it.
Well, what an amazing experience and story too, especially just seeing like a bunch of old faces again, just coming back and being able to support you a second time. That's all like, what makes tiering so fun. Like when, especially when you have someone who really wants to go for the title and, have all these people supporting you, or you're the one supporting them. It's always very like inspiring and really great to hear. So big shout outs to all the Bandori boomers and the quote unquote mysterious listener listening to right now. Shout outs to them as well. So again, Sue, big congrats on that title again. It's been quite some time, but regardless, good stuff there. And Clam, I know you had a recent experience with Project Sekai tiering, and is actually very, very recent, to the point where we even have to move this recording to a different day because of it. But how was that experience like? I don't know if this was your first tiering experience in Sekai, or how did that go?
This was actually my second experience now,
okay.
And I said it wasn't going to happen again after the first. There's a certain listener in here whose name will not be said. A bunch of T1s are going for this event, so you should join in on the wall. And I'm like, that sounds like a lot of fun. I'm there. So my T1 came a few months ago, which was, I think, not too long after Sue's, and this was for the Shizuku banner, my color, or color of myself, whichever you want to say it. I took a different approach from Sue. Well, Sue had like all the boomers assemble from like Bandori. Like, I ended up like trying to get like to know more about like the Ian Sekai community, the people who've like never really played Bandori. So like I met a lot of new faces from there, because I also dragged along Bells with me, who's also a very like whale Bandori player.
Oh yeah.
She was my T2, and we tiered together. We met a lot of new people from it. Like, it's at the same time, we also kind of like tiered just between us, because it was a really like quiet event, I guess. So we was mostly just us, like, hanging in there with each other, and just whenever people would stop by to like fill, we'd like, all right, come on in. Because this was like towards the time when it was still viable to like 2-man, because like you didn't really need to like fully like have these super uber competitive rooms to tier high. So we would just like tier, people would stop in and out. It was a very like casual event, like meeting some people, seeing some old faces come around again. For T10, it was a different story. They were like sprinting for their lives from pubs who were playing like 24 plus hours.
Oh man,
to catch up. And to the point where like one of our runners, who actually is another Bandori player, Tiramiz, they had to like leave work early and like pretend to be sick just to come home and run.
Oh no!
And like they were like out of T10 for a moment, but like we assembled like the Avengers of boosters, like because like Sue mentioned how like team composition matters. Like there's like the whalest people ever coming together to help her, and we were able to keep them in T10. It was a nail biting experience.
That is wow, that's something, getting off of work and be like, I'm sick of boat sickness. Gotta go home. A little seasick there. Yeah. Well, Clive, in your opinion, how like, again, we haven't heard too much from you, but like in terms of like Sekai tier, like overall, like how do you feel about like the experience of it, like and also maybe share a little bit about what you think about the community as well, like how is that overall?
Like, to my honest opinion, I'm like starting to like kind of I'm starting to really appreciate Bandori tiering again.
Okay.
Or like not that I would do it again in the near future at the very least, but I'm like, it's kind of appreciating that like you can just take like a bunch of podiums and a bunch of T10s, stuff them in the one room, and watch as they all just neum together. Whereas like Sekai, you're gonna need like it's kind of in like unless it's like a chill event in like competitive cases, you're gonna need people who aren't tiering to help you because they're the ones with the big whale teams that are gonna help like beat your competition with you.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a different like it's a different environment, basically, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. Like I could definitely see how like Bandori, you could have like very overlapping roles, right? Where like if you spend this X amount of like finance or funds and such, like you could have someone who's like a really good tier, also a carry team, also like will play long hours, and like you can kind of like have a role compression there. And by the sound of Sekai, like you might have like people specifically like these are like gacha whales that are specifically there just to like boost the room, and then these other people are just like actually like tiering, maybe not necessarily have the resources to maybe they need to use the resources for the actual tiering part, not necessarily the gacha part. But it's pretty interesting to hear.
What I've learned from like smaller servers and like Bandori side at least is like your best fillers are people who tier with you.
Yeah.
So like they will so if there's like a competitive T10, they will be in your rooms 24/7 running for their lives with you. So it's definitely like really helpful to have them.
Definitely. Well, Clam, it's good to hear that you are able to also get your T1 there alongside Bells, and then of course recently another. I believe that you were able to fend off the Chaser in T10 for the recent event as well.
Yes, sir.
All right.
I just parked a few hours ago, actually.
Nice.
The event's just about to end too, thankfully.
Okay, well that's great.
It wasn't really a stressful experience either. It was mostly just like it's like the wall is approaching you, and you just gotta like, all right, we gotta keep running. There's no stopping.
yeah, for sure, sure.
It was also Ian Sekai's first instance of the Cheerful Carnival event, and it's like basically what Team Live is in Bandori, but like with a few exceptions. And aside from servers being not the best, and it's a common theme in JPs as well. It was a lot of fun, like playing through like random songs and like meeting pubs and like spamming stamps with them. It's definitely a different experience, and I had a lot of fun with it.
Okay. Well, that's great. Again, getting you're going to secure a T10 title in the very first Ian Cheerful Carnival Cheerful Carnival event. That's an achievement to put your just be like first boomer Cheerful Carnival Ian Sekai title. So. Big props to you guys for both of you for doing both all these tiering achievements. Again, it's just crazy to see how motivated you two are in terms of tiering, and it's just so great to see all the achievements. Now, are there any future events? I know, again, retirement is a word we've mentioned a few times, but are there future events? Are there any extra future plans for any of you in the future for tiering?
So I actually have a podium upcoming in a couple days.
Oh.
Secret distant. You mentioned an upcoming tier. I'm actually going to be tiering Mizuki's second focus banner.
Nice.
And I am going for podium.
Okay. All right. Well, all the best to you too. Hopefully it will be smooth sailing there. Yeah. And Clam, any whale thoughts for you too? You said that, every time, I'm going to stop, but...
Retirement is...
At least not for a long while. I don't see them happening. Probably maybe in like a half a year or so, I think should be around the next time. But
half a year's not that long.
Don't say that. Please don't say that. That's also on Ian Sekai's side. For Endori, kind of considering something for next year, but like that's way too far in the future, and it's only T10. It's nothing like
okay.
bad or anything
That's
like that.
fair.
I think I'm 100% done with podiums at the very least.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, for either of you, again, both of you, all the best in your future events, whether it's a few days from now or a whole year from now. All the best in your tiering adventures, and I'm sure that, again, listeners, you'll be able to follow, of course, our guests through Twitter or through our Discord server. You'll be able to interact with them if you want to come show your support. So I'm sure they greatly appreciate that. Yeah. Before we go, for the two of you, again, it has been a great time speaking with the two of you. I just want to briefly talk about a studio question that I ask our Discord members. So every week in the podcast, I have a studio question that our Discord servers members ask or answer, and all their answers will be on the video as well. But for this week, I asked our members what would be a dream collaboration event for you in Bang Dream. So I'm gonna also ask this question to you two. I don't know if you two have any ideas of what possible collaborations you may want to see Bang Dream, even though, again, both of you have kind of slowly moved out of Bang Dream, but maybe a dream collaboration event that might bring you back into Bang Dream for just a little bit.
I think, all right, so I have one realistic and unrealistic.
Okay.
I think for realistic, I would love to see Super Sentai for RAS. That would be really, really cool. I think that would fit a lot. And I think for unrealistic, anything with Symphogear, man.
Yeah, I'm not in the. I don't think it's out of the realm of impossibility. Like, for instance, like Aiba Aina is literally Nana Mizuki. Like, she sang like 4 of her songs. I don't think it's out of the realm of impossibility. We could hope, we could pray. Sue, what about you? Do you have any thoughts of possible collaboration?
I mean, as a joke, I think I said in the chat, like, Bandori times retirement as myself.
Yeah.
But I think an honest answer to that question, I think one franchise that I would say is like a very like always on the nail is like Pokemon, because I love Pokemon personally. So like I mean, like, I know Pokemon, I feel like it's very unrealistic because it's Pokemon and Nintendo, and they're like a huge like like company. Like, what kind of game rhythm gacha game needs to collab with Pokemon? It's already huge.
Exactly.
But it would be nice to see like like not a specific band, but just like kind of seeing the direction of like maybe like typings, or like seeing what characters have like what Pokemon assigned to them. That would definitely get me back into the game, I would say.
Yeah. Again, I think that would be a pretty interesting one. And again, D4DJ, again, also a game owned by Bushiroad, the same as Bang Dream. They do have a cover of the original Pokemon theme song in there. Whether or not that could actually end up being so relevant enough to make a full-blown collaboration is yet to be seen. But, fingers crossed, maybe. We'll see how it goes. There hasn't been a big collaboration in quite some time. There has been like the out of the game, like the Omori ones, for instance. Yeah, we'll see if there's any like in-game collaborations, maybe some big ones in the future. There's going to be some of one of our Discord members, and their responses are going to be on the video as well. And they're going to share your answers. And of course, for our listeners out there, feel free to comment below as well as to what kind of collaboration you may want to see in the future with Bang Dream. So yeah, pretty interesting discussion. Again, copyright is like a big pain in the ass. So we'll see if how Bushiroad kind of walks around it. The one thing that again, like one thing before we end the subject here, I feel like Iandori is like kind of funny because like we give Iandori a lot of flack and a lot of shit, right? But like I think surprisingly they've kind of walked around like the copyright things decently well, like surprisingly well. Like in the beginning, there was definitely some songs that like got axed like immediately, but I feel like there's some songs where like, oh, that might get copyrighted, and they kind of like find a way. So I think if there's one thing that like I give a little bit of just a little bit of props to Iandori, I think their copyright team is kind of doing a above average job.
Yeah, we had like a lot of songs stuck in like limbo for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I know Namai Kaibutsu was also one that was stuck in limbo for a while. We finally got that.
Yeah.
I don't know. We got Discotheque too.
Yeah, Discotheque, Everlasting Guilty Crown. There was a point where I really thought CQ was not going to be in the game, but they found a way to put that in there too. So, yeah.
I think the only big ones we're missing are probably like God Knows and Shinai.
Yeah, God Knows and Shinai. I actually messaged Lucia one day. I was like, oh, after Discotheque got in the game, I'm like, shit, Lucia, when is Shinai gonna be into the game? Like, is there any news on that? And his answer was no comment. I got shut down so hard. I was so sad. It's like one of my favorite songs too.
At least we got Baby Shark. That's the one upside.
The very important one, Baby Shark. Imagine, I mean, I've talked to some people about that too. Like, imagine tearing Baby Shark with that, because that event I think was Poppy Ween, I think, with Baby Shark, or was that with Nyan Cat? I don't remember.
Nyan Cat was Ween. Baby Shark was Full Bloom, and I remember that so strongly because that was the T10 that I had that we didn't cover. And I just remember Homie Dixon trying to tear the entire event with Baby Shark.
Oh my gosh. I remember when Nyan Cat came out, I think I was so shocked, and also like it was a mixture of like shock, horror, and nostalgia that I couldn't even finish the map. I like failed it.
Yeah, see, I think I remember the Iandori team did a poll on what collaboration to want to see next. Like that's how Baby Shark and Nyan Cat got in it. And I don't think we've heard results from that yet. And I'm kind of scared to hear the results. I think it's best maybe we don't hear the results, but
there is no way they won it. If we're gonna hear it, they're gonna like, if we see the results, watch them be like 25th, and like they somehow got in because they couldn't get 1 through 24.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Yeah, but aside, but we'll see what kind of collaborations we'll see in the future with Bang Dream. But either way, for the both of you, it has been a great pleasure having both of you on the stage today on this RePHIL studio. Are there any last words that any of you want to share to any of our listeners before we end off today?
Don't
play Project Sekai. It's a bad game. It's a bad game.
Says the T1 haver.
We have me and Clam have experience. We'll vouch for you. Stay away.
It's always the people, right? All these people that with their like big titles, right, with their T1s and their podiums. It's like they're always the one who are vouching. Don't play the game, guys. Whether it's
great. It's just tier responsibly.
Tier responsibly. Yeah, I think especially with tier, right? Once you play a game for so long, either whether it's Bang Dream or Project Sekai, after you play a game for so long, it gets to the point where you kind of like you enjoy it so much. Either you enjoy it so much that you start to like talk shit about it, but or you just like flat out be like, okay, no more. But yeah,
I think you kind of just become that one Steam meme that where the guy's like, this is my favorite. I hate this game. It's the worst game ever, and it's like they have like that. Yeah,
I know.
That's
us.
Well, either way, for our lovely whale guests here, they're just, I guess, letting our viewers know, don't whale, or tier responsibly. So we'll see if our listeners actually listen to that advice. But either way, thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the RePHIL Studio. And again, the set has been complete, but get your cans ready. We'll refill on the next set in our next episode with our next set of special guests. But until then, don't forget all of our podcasts. You could listen to any of it on your favorite podcast platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all that fun stuff. And don't forget to, of course, join the Young Academy Discord server. You can interact with the studio question that we have every week, as well as our special guests over. So until then, everyone, we'll see you all in the next set. Take care and bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Bye bye. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.